Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date. My name is Erich Kurschat. I am the owner of Harmony Insights LLC, a company that allows me to help organizations and clients, consultants rather, use the DISC personality assessment with their employees and their clients, especially now when a lot of professional development is being done virtually. DISC is a resource that companies are using to develop and engage their remote workers. I'm also the founder of HR Hot Seat, an inclusive mastermind community of HR professionals, real HR pros solving real HR problems, as we like to say. We are in 10 chapters around the country, over 2,400 members, and continuing to grow. And you can find out more about HR Hot Seat at, as you can imagine, hrhotseat.com. I'm glad that was available.
Made it easy. It helped, right?
Today's conversation is going to be a fun one. I selfishly have put together a series of Harmony Insights lunch dates because I wanted to be inspired by people who inspire me, and Matt Elwell has made the short list. Matt Elwell, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you. And of the people who at least have their videos on, I know two of you. So hi, Shannon. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for joining. Hi, Karen. Hi, Christian. So this is real exciting.
That is an excellent start. I'm always happy to recognize people, and always happy when I don't recognize people, because that means that I get to meet new folks. So, we have a total of 30 minutes today. Our Harmony Insights lunch dates last 30 minutes. I'm going to try something new. Or I'm trying something new this week. If anybody would like to stay on after 12:30 Central Time, I'm going to open up microphones for you to ask questions and engage with Matt and myself, and open up the conversation a little bit. In the meantime, you're welcome to use that chat area to include comments to us or to fellow attendees, as well as any questions you may have that we might be able to incorporate into our half-hour conversation. We're so glad to have you with us for that. This conversation is being recorded, and we'll see what I do with it at some point. If I'm able to do something with it, make it available. But in the meantime, I'm glad that we're all able to be together for this 30 minutes. Matt, I have promised people a meaningful, actionable conversation today.
Okay.
And I'd like to start with giving you the opportunity to give people just a brief context for who you are, where you come from, and why you were interested in this particular conversation today.
Sure. So I've basically been doing learning and development for 15 years. But before that, and as part of that, I've been doing improvisation professionally for about 20 years. So I'm a Chicago improviser. I perform at a theater called CSE Chicago. We do comedy sports. Lisa does comedy sports in her hometown. So thank you for joining. And I know Shannon also does improv in Portland. So we've got some improv minds here. Erich speaks improv. So this is going to be good gel. But what I kind of position myself as doing is bringing the worlds of business and improv together in learning and development. And that started as teaching soft skills, but now it's kind of broader and in kind of consulting around systems and human performance improvement, and like, how does the whole way the business functions help people be more human, help them engage, and more importantly, most of the time is where is it saying one thing but then doing another, and trying to create more integrity and authenticity in how we treat people, because then we get more out of them when they're being treated decently. It's an amazing concept.
Go figure, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you and I initially met through ATD Chicagoland, who is an association partner of HR Hot Seat, and I'm grateful that we did meet, because it's led to a couple of great conversations, and this conversation in particular. I'm really excited to get into some of the improv stuff. This isn't going to be 30 minutes full of improv tenets, but I have had some experiences myself, as you suggested, and I really believe strongly in the impact that improvisational comedy tenets can have on the business world and the work that you're doing specifically. So I'm grateful to be able to have this conversation. To begin on a meaningful note, and we will continue on a meaningful note throughout, but everybody is experiencing COVID-19 in a different way. A lot of us are working from home who hadn't previously, having to change up schedules and homeschool children, and the list goes on and on. How have you been personally impacted, if you're willing to share,
Sure.
by the coronavirus?
It's been terrifying. Within a week, I lost 4 months of work.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I do up until now was live, and I would
Hmm.
do improv-based training and consulting, and literally I had jobs lined up from March through June, and they all vanished. And um, so I was kind of in a real space of terror. Like it was really scary. And, one of my roles is as executive director of CSE Worldwide, and that's the global licensor of comedy sports. So if you see comedy sports, it's this kind of all ages friendly show, a little bit like Whose Line Is It Anyway? I help those 29 organizations around the world do that show, and we all freaked out. Like we all were like, what how do we, we have not had a landlord yet who was like, yeah, you don't need to pay us. Like that's just not what happens, right?
Right.
Like your insurance company doesn't go, you don't need to pay us. No, like the vendors that a lot of theaters have to have just keep going,
Right.
especially banks and interest and loans and all the ways we survive as small businesses. So there was a lot of disruption. There was a lot of fear. And I think what was cool, and I will try not to get emotional, but I do sometimes,
Hmm.
is, here were these 29 people. We were all in the same boat, but we had each other's backs. And so we really kind of gelled like an improv team quickly. And so, I started taking a class from a great guy named Leif Hansen on virtual improv training. And we started building deliverables ourselves and figuring out how to do this, and cut to a couple weeks later in Chicago, CSE Chicago was doing its first virtual improv match. So I played a comedy sports match on Zoom, literally like standing where I'm standing right now, just wearing my comedy sports uniform, and doing more motion. So it was so tremendously scary, tremendously disruptive. Luckily, my partner, my wife, has a job that she's able to hold on to right now, so that
Hmm.
provided some kind of island security. But it was also this team of people who were like, we're going to face this chaos together, and we're going to be an island of safety for each other, and a way of, we shared a lot of our best practices through our own virtual system, Basecamp, which is how we connect.
Yeah.
And it made all the difference. Like the resiliency of improv people really like showed up. It's not it's not just something we say. Like I saw it in action for
Yeah.
the last month.
I feel like your experience is similar to mine and to a lot of people's, where you're used to attending something in person, a live event, and you say, well, that's where the
Mhm.
magic happens, when you get together face to face. And now suddenly you're faced with um, attempting to maintain that magic online. And,
Yes.
you wonder, is it possible? And I think um, arena after arena is proving that it is possible. And you can say, well, it doesn't quite measure up, or it's a little bit different, but it's still possible. And I really admire those organizations that, rather than throwing in the towel, are saying, how can we take what we do live, which is so
Hmm.
important, and do it virtually and continue to serve our audiences. I am in the classical music world myself, and I'm seeing all of these orchestras and choruses coming together online in their individual homes, and singing and playing in a way that is just profoundly moving, and putting it out there
Hmm.
and saying, hey, you can't come into our homes to hear this, so let us come into yours. And the work that you're doing with improvisation, Lisa makes a great point, saying we're all improvisers now, and that's so true. Whether or not you use that title or that label for yourself,
Yeah.
we all are improvising in some way. Our
Hmm.
conversation today is around how to, various versions of this title, but how to make virtual meetings less terrible,
Yeah.
as you initially put it. And if you've come up with variations of that title. How do you feel, from your perspective, our participants today are experiencing terrible virtual meetings?
I have opinions. Um, Here's what I'll say. When I originally conceived of coming on your show and having this conversation, I thought I would just share a bunch of stupid Zoom games, like the kind of things we do as icebreakers and stuff.
Mhm.
And your description of the program really made me take a second look. And you talked about taking care of each other, promoting engagement, and making the most of our time together. And what came up for me in that was how much you need to do to make a Zoom meeting not terrible happens outside the meeting.
Mm.
So I think we think a lot about like, oh, I'll do this exercise in the meeting, I'll do this discussion in the meeting, and that will be great. And I think there is a lot of thought to that, but I think there's some preparations ahead of the conversation that we need to observe and afterwards. And there's a lot of things that, like, so as someone who does soft skills training, I'm called in a lot when management is unhappy with the quality of their sales forces selling, or their customer service teams serving. And so often what I find, it's kind of why I expanded beyond training to this more OD, human performance improvement function, is so often the problem was not they didn't have the knowledge, skills, and attitudes. The problem was they were being demoralized by bad management or by ineffective systems. So you had good people and bad systems, and it was rotting them.
Hmm.
And so I think about, like, if you already have blind spots as a leader, if you already struggle as a leader, and now your great idea is that you're going to get on Zoom and reassure everybody, but you were never that reassuring to begin with, and now everyone's really terrified, that it's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
And so um, I've been kind of thinking about, I made this statement on Facebook a long time ago, and I think I'll make it again on Twitter. But I said, shout out to all the people who are taking live meetings that could have been emails and creating Zoom meetings that could have been emails.
Hmm.
Like, if we don't need to have a meeting, this technology is not an excuse to have a meeting.
Hmm.
And also the fact that we're having Zoom fatigue now, where people are like, I've been on Zoom calls for the last 4 hours. It's like, it's not going to make me feel better about my job if I'm on
Right.
another Zoom call, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have to be thoughtful about that and the value of our message. Um, but
So
I'll,
can we pause just long enough for
yeah,
me to
please,
make
yeah,
sure
go
I
ahead.
understand what you're saying? So it sounds like the first challenge you were describing is that taking something that doesn't work in the real world and just putting it online doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work. That if you have that
Yeah,
bad leadership, you have bad systems already in place, moving it online doesn't magically make it more engaging or more effective. So the first challenge is,
right.
if we aren't, number one, do we have to move things online? Is that necessary, or can it be an email? Or two, if we do, what are we doing differently online such that there's reason for it and there's value in this coming together?
Hmm. So, yeah, I think, digital crap still smells. So everything that I was writing as I was planning this was like, it's about agenda management. It's about making sure people have some autonomy. And those are all things we should be doing in healthy meetings. So, like, for instance, one of the things I want to talk about around promoting engagement was that I think leaders right now need to strike this tone between being receptive and being prescriptive, and between candor and sensitivity. And so what I mean by that is, like, being receptive is really creating these spaces where we can listen to people just go, this sucks, I'm scared, and
Mhm.
letting those conversations happen. And also, and I know you're a big disc guy as well, like, I'm also noticing, like, my high Ds are deciding, like, well, we got to get in there and tell them that if they're not talking to their clients right now, that, I mean, they're the difference between us closing or not.
Right.
And it's like, and you go to it. So a D for everybody else is like a hot type A personality. It's like just that, like, fast, too much
Dominant and
energy,
decisive, and
dominant,
yeah,
yeah, director, right?
all very
And then
positive things, by the way, but just like any other style, it can get
can
carried
be,
away, right?
yeah, yeah. And also, when these groups get into stress, then they stress each other out. So you say that to a certain population that really likes security, and they go, oh, I'm life is meaningless, I'm fired already, I'm just waiting, right? So
Mhm.
we need to be thoughtful about how we frame these messages. But the other thing is, I think people right now can get really um, paralyzed. And so, like, one strategy I've seen is a quick, and I think one of the powers of Zoom is a quick call, right? So we're going to have a quick call at 9 a.m. where we're all going to talk about what we're going to try and do that day. And then we're going to have a quick call at 4:45 where we talk about what we actually accomplished,
Mhm.
right? And so the prescriptive part is, this is the process. The receptive part will be, even though I am your leader, I want you to come to me with what your to-dos are for today. And if I need more from you, we'll negotiate that, right?
Mhm.
But I'm letting you, but I'm creating the space where we're gonna kind of marshal our consciousness together and not, these days, I don't know about you, these days kind of run one into the other for me, and nothing seems to, like, Tuesday, like it's all Tuesday
I'm
now.
always
It's just all
wondering
Tuesday.
I'm always wondering what day it is.
Yeah.
And the weather isn't helping. For those of us in Chicago, just a few
Hmm.
days ago I was outside running in nearly 80-degree weather, and snow just passed by my window. Like for the past 5 minutes, it's been slowing. And so we have this,
Hmm.
I don't know what day of the week it is. I'm not sure what season of the year it is.
Yeah.
It's all blending together. And oh, wait a minute, here's another, Zoom meeting. And is this a good thing? Did we already talk about this? It all kind of blends together, right?
No, it just gets surreal. I'll give you one. I know one of the things you really wanted was actionable stuff, and so when talking about promoting engagement, I think one of the things we tend to do is, as we talk about these things that are happening to us, we tend to intellectualize them. So, as much as we do need the prompt and the breakout, of, hey, talk about what's going on for you. And one prompt I found especially useful is, what has surprised you in this?
Mm,
So people are used to talking about how terrible it is, how scared they are. They're also used to people going, but what opportunity exists in all this? And, like,
mhm,
if you're not ready for that conversation, that comes off as real, like, how will you be productive for me? And it's just not a good, it's not a good look for leaders right
mhm.
now.
Right.
But one of the things, uh, sorry, I guess
Someone's coming
fires
for
don't,
you. I don't know
yeah,
who it is,
fires
Matt,
don't get
but
COVID-19. There's fire trucks going by my door. Yeah, so, we still have time for other disasters. But what I was
Shannon,
going to
it
say
seems like
is,
Shannon is applauding the fact that the authorities are coming for you. So just I want to make sure that that was clear.
Shannon knows I should be put away. But I will say this. What was the other thing I really wanted to say? Oh, so I think part of the play in this is not intellectualizing everything, not verbalizing everything. So Shannon knows, because she was at TD Coco, which I'll talk about at the end of this, is we started by, make a sound and a gesture that is how you feel right now.
Mm,
So people would just go, ugh,
mm,
or someone would go, ugh, or someone
mhm,
would go, ugh, right?
mhm,
And we would mirror that.
mhm,
But I think what was so powerful about that, and I think what makes for a great icebreaker, is most of your Zoom call is going to be people talking and people reading stuff on a screen. If you can create some space for us to be human, which is largely non-intellectual and non-verbal, to stretch that side, I think you create a space for a more organic conversation.
mhm,
The other thing that I think is, we tend, there's a lot of tools, right? So we can use the reactions, we can use the chat, we can use polling in Zoom, but also find ways to just kind of be human. So one of the things that I used with TD Coco was what I call the I concur motion, which is just ASL for yes, but it means I agree. So if you can teach your people to do this, then notice how, like, I didn't have to find where the reaction was I
mhm,
wanted. I didn't get distracted. I can just go, yep, that resonates with me. And now the weirdest thing has happened is that I've become physically engaged, which is
mm.
something that we as improvisers talk about. How do we get this into our body? Because if we're just talking heads. Now, one thing I would suggest, I don't know if everybody's comfortable implementing it. I don't think it's something that we can expect everyone to do all day. But if you can convince people to spend an hour of their meeting times at a standing desk, if there's just a high shelf or a bookshelf even that they could just throw their computer on for a given call. Like, I'm standing right now, right? I forgot something was behind me, but I'm
You're almost
standing.
not standing.
Yeah. I'm so, whoa! No. But there's something about that that allows for a little bit more energy.
Yeah.
Right. So just having that maybe be part of your call. I think also for people who talk in agile, like, the fact that you're stuck at home doesn't mean you have to give up on those meetings, those stand-up meetings,
Right.
right? You just need to you just got to remind everybody to stand up. Um,
I like that. That's similar. I've done some career coaching myself, and it's similar to advising clients to dress up when they're on a
yes.
telephone interview. No one can see you if it's via telephone, right? But there's something about
Yep.
dressing up that changes your confidence, your perspective, your tone of voice, all of that. And in your opinion, standing also helps. No necessary need to be standing if you're on a Zoom call, right? You could be sitting, you could be lying on the floor if you want, but there's something about standing that brings a different energy to conversations, it sounds like.
Well, and improv's about change. Like what keeps an audience involved is that they don't know what's going to happen next. And the only way we really do that as improvisers is because we purposely don't know what's going to happen next. We
Hmm.
resist planning. We try to create what we call discoveries, which is where the moment I say it and I figure out what I just meant is when you figure it out, right?
Hmm.
So I think the lesson is not necessarily standing, because then we have people standing all day, but it's do something different,
Hmm.
right? And so if you've been sitting all day, then yeah, let's stand for this meeting,
Hmm.
right? um I think that's also something we need to think about when we're in these new uncomfortable spaces, is trying to resist our urge to set it and forget it. So when I was going through a rough time in my life, which I would say now this is,
Hmm.
but when I was going through one before, I was living with a guy who was Buddhist. He studied in the Shambhala tradition, which is an American tradition of Buddhism. And he said, you're going to be tempted in this time of great disruption and openness to seize on closure, to
Hmm.
find ways to kind of lock in systems and do things this way. And he said, resist that, because this openness is an opportunity for you.
Hmm.
And so, as much as managers are going to want to go, okay, so here's how we're going to do things now. Every day we're going to do it this way, and this is how things are going to happen. Like, you've clearly seen the universe has gone, oh, did you expect things to be cool for March through June? No,
Right.
totally uncool, right? Like, listen to that,
Yeah.
in that just make a plan for today. Like, hey, today let's try something. And you get, for all this weird kind of Zoom icebreaker, nonverbal theater game on a Zoom call, the stuff we're talking about, you will get so much more permission from your people to do that
Hmm.
if you say, hey, I'm trying something.
I will say it gets tricky, and I love that point, and I see the value in it. I think it gets tricky with some personality styles, which is my area of expertise, who
Mm-hmm.
gravitate, we'll say, toward predictability and routine. There's safety there, right? So
Yeah.
if I can set it and forget it for the coming week, there's something about that that may allow me to feel safety or control in an environment that I feel like I don't have those sorts of things. But it sounds like you're saying that even somebody with that personality style can still give themselves permission or request permission from others to not throw caution to the wind, right, and make it up as they go, but to
And
mix
it's
things
not.
up just a little bit in a way that might allow their message to be heard better, might allow them to be more effective as a leader or a salesperson or an individual contributor in ways that they wouldn't be if they were so rigid about how they're approaching their meetings.
So one of the things I just put in chat was articulate and negotiate, which I have now started just slipping into every single conversation training I do, things like that. I think for those personalities that are like, but what are we going to do now?
Hmm.
I think you will get a lot of mileage with them by telling them what you're about to do before you do it.
Hmm.
And that's the other reason why so much has to happen before the Zoom call, right? Is that like, not, like, so Eric is, dude, I've never had anyone do this before. Like, you sent me here's a general outline of the conversation and things you'll want to prepare for this conversation. And it made me feel like, oh, I can paint by these numbers and I'll be okay. And it
Hmm.
was so refreshing to me. But I'd never done this before. And there's nothing you could have done that would have had me automatically do it before.
Hmm.
But you articulated, right, what was going to happen. So I think you being able to sandbox the unexpected
Hmm.
is how you provide real service to those people who need consistency right now. Because I think there's also a lesson right now is you may need consistency, but everything we know about business right now is volatility, uncertainty, change, and ambiguity, right? VUCA
Yeah.
right now is, and this, COVID-19 is basically like the universe saying, I told you VUCA was coming. Like, this is VUCA. We don't know when it'll end. We can't stop it. We can't control it. The news changes every day. So now what we have to say is, within this space, here's what we're going to try.
Could you say that what VUCA stands for one more time? There may be people listening who haven't heard this term before.
Yes.
And if you haven't, it's being discussed now in a way that's really exciting. You're going to hear a lot more about it. So we won't go into it further. But what does VUCA stand for one more time?
Yeah. So VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, change, and ambiguity. And
I
it's
love
and
that.
it's just kind of like everything. Yeah. And I put VUCA does not equal verruca, which are warts, but it kind of does equal warts, because
All
it's a
right.
wart on all your plans.
All right. Love it. Let's if you can believe it, and you probably can, we've already blown through so much of our time and blown through in the best
Smashing
possible
through.
way. I want to make sure that we are continuing to end on very actionable takeaways. So what else do
Hmm.
you have to share with our audience that you think that they can put into practice immediately following our conversation?
So I think there's a lot, and a lot of it comes around planning your agenda ahead of time, letting people know that you're going to do something a little weird, and framing this icebreaker that I'm suggesting that you do as an investment in the rest of the meeting. So if you're having a 30-minute meeting, a 3-minute icebreaker is a 10% investment.
Mhm.
So share with them, like, I want to do this 3 minutes because I think it will help do this, right? So I think I might even have some language in here for you on that. Sorry, I will see. I think I said something like this idea of, yes. All right. So for what it's worth, this is going in the chat. Um, I'm sure not all of us need or want to do something goofy, but I'm asking for that investment of our time because I believe this activity will pay dividends of empathy and focus for the rest of the meeting.
I love that.
Right.
Great way to set it up.
Yeah, and you can hack that just in terms of, like, I know this isn't. I know some of you are going to need to adapt to this behavior, and it's not going to be mandatory fun is not fun, but
Mhm.
it's necessary. Like, I really believe mandatory fun is necessary, but you have to frame it with a lot of empathy for people who are like, seriously. Um, but you'll notice this language of investment and dividends says to our more type A people, or our high Ds or our high Cs, like, I am doing this on purpose. I am not doing this just because I like icebreakers, which I think
Right.
is the rap that icebreakers get, is that they're done by people who like them with
Yeah.
no reason.
Yeah.
And they're not. There's a reason. We know, like, business is talking about empathy right now. Business is talking about mindfulness. I can draw a line from why I'm having you play a dumb game to what I need out of you from this meeting. And then, since you also said that you wanted, like, at least one valuable resource, I'm
Mhm.
just throwing this in.
You're
Two
fantastic at
things.
using the chat area, by the way, Matt. Not everybody does this, and I love how you're throwing stuff in there on the fly.
Yeah, so I have this all prepped in Evernote. I took your outline, I pulled the things that I wanted to do, and I had them ready to cut and paste over to chat.
Awesome. So
And I did
helpful.
that before the meeting, which is, again, why I'm saying, like, this meeting is less terrible because I did some things to make sure you weren't all
Yes.
going, what is he talking? I can't write
Yeah.
this down that fast, right? So there's two things here. One is Thiagi, who a lot of learning and development people will know. He's kind of like he's this another guy who kind of stands in the middle of applied improvisation, which is what I do and Shannon does, and what learning and development, right? Is he's known for learning and development, but he often speaks at the Applied Improv Network, and he's made his life around interactive games and learning. So he has a post on LinkedIn literally about doing openers in virtual spaces, right? Which he calls live online learning activities, or LOLAs, because he doesn't listen to music. Uh, but and the other is a drama resource. This is just, improv games are translated through oral tradition, so everybody gets them from everywhere and thinks they own them. So you're going to see this in a lot of different places. This one's called Count to 20. And if it worked, it would be us all with our mics on, and one person would say one, and one person would say two, and another person would say three. Improvisers are nodding their heads, right? And then if two people said four at the same time, we would start over.
Mm.
And so you're listening, you're creating pause there, and it creates, like, and you'll see, I think there's a calmness that happens when you do it. There's a focus on listening, but there's also real space to say, how are you being affected right now? Because I guarantee it, if what's happening right now is listening, self-soothing, we're in so much disruption, that stuff's not working right now. Like, we're all kind of in a fight or flight. So this count to 20 kind of changes the energy on the call. And it doesn't have to be 20. It can be like, there's 9 people here. I'd probably do 9 because I want to set people up also for an easy success.
Mhm.
But it's like, oh, so we can still have this kind of intimacy in a virtual space. We just have to all kind of let it happen, and it's uncomfortable.
This has been great, Matt, and I know you have probably so much more material that you have prepared that we haven't been able to share yet, but I want to honor the fact that we've advertised a half an hour and
Hmm.
people may need to get on with their day. As I mentioned when we first started, I'd like, if you're able to and want to, you want to stick around, we will have everyone unmuted, or I believe you can unmute yourselves to ask Matt any questions you may have, get clarity on some of the things that he's already mentioned. But in the meantime, for people who do have to go, Matt, where can people find you to learn so much more about what you are doing to help those of us who would love to make virtual meetings less terrible?
Hey, you don't think I put it in chat, do you? So there's my email address. I talked about CSE Worldwide, and so there's just there's trainings that you can do. So there's a virtual training link there. There is CSEWorldwide.com, the home page. Good, Bryce. Awesome, man. Um, uh, Virtual training, but there's also CSEWorldwide.com. The homepage is where you can see everybody's comedy sports matches. If you want coaching on this or anything else, you can go to my page on coaching. Also for TD professionals, I'm doing networking using Zoom. I use a lot of these concepts, so that's TD Coco. And then I'm also throwing in a Calendly link. If you just want to spend 22 minutes, no obligation, free, just talk about this more, those are all options.
I love that you put in 22 minutes. Why? I have my own theory. Why is it 22 minutes?
So the standard was 30, and then I didn't want back-to-back meetings.
Yeah,
I wanted some time to process and write things down and remind myself and plan a next step. And so that would be 25 minutes.
yeah,
Then if I say 25 minutes, I'm going to do this and then I'll become 30.
you're right.
So I went, I'm going to try 22. And if we each have 11 minutes, what'll that be like? And
I,
now, because I love portmanteaus and puns so much, I should have said it's 22, because then each of us get our own prime time slot,
well
because
done.
11's a prime number, and
It
you're
is
welcome.
indeed.
You're welcome for that.
I love it. 22 minutes makes me think of television without the commercials. A half hour show is down to 22 minutes. So I immediately think
Oh, that's what I meant.
I'm going to get the best of Matt Elwell without the commercials. It's going to be 22 minutes of solid conversation.
Yeah. Oh, I'm using that. That's what I'm going to say. People ask, I'm going to say that.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Matt. It's been a pleasure having you on. I'm so glad that you agreed to do this. If people enjoyed this conversation, you felt it was beneficial, go to harmonyinsights.com /lunch dates to see what I have scheduled for the rest of this week and coming up. If you yourselves or you know other people who you think would make great guests, I would love to hear from you. That's Erich, ERICH at Harmony Insights, harmonyinsights.com. But thank you so much for being a part of this. And I hope to see you coming up this week. We have a couple of great conversations. Tomorrow I'm hosting one called Disc Nerds Unite. We're going to be talking about the DISC personality assessment. Thursday and Friday have to do with
I'm
finding
there for
clarity
that
in a
one.
time of confusion, including wellness and mindfulness. And then a conversation coming up next week that I'm excited about with a colleague of mine who is a professional organizer, going to talk about decluttering your workspace now that you're working from home, and would love to have you be a part of that. So again, Matt, thank you for being a part of this.